Hello, everybody. Welcome to Perspectives of Change. I'm your host, Sarika Kharbanda. Quick introduction about Perspectives of Change. At Perspectives of Change, we are dedicated to exploring how to nudge change forward by understanding and valuing multiple perspectives. Today, we have a return speaker, a return guest. We just heard Fran Cormack on, what did we call it? Journeying through the six thinking hats. Edward de Bono's Six Thinking Hats. And we have Fran Cormack back again for what we want to call it today is Hexagons and Thinking. What's the connection? I'm intrigued by the title myself, so we'll find out. Welcome, Fran. Welcome back again.
Thank you. Great to be here, and another interesting topic to explore together.
Indeed, indeed. And I know you are a returning guest on our podcast, but of course, for any of our new listeners and new viewers, I'd love for you to still give us another introduction of yours, yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I'm a coach, facilitator and trainer, currently based in Perth, Western Australia, predominantly working with teams and specifically around team development and high performance, and how do teams get that elusive high performance.
Awesome. And did you also want to mention once again on this podcast about this amazing book club that you're running?
Yes, thank you again for the invite. So around maybe almost 12 months ago now, myself and a mutual friend of ours, Ro Gorrell, who's also an author and written her own book on coaching self-organising teams. We were having a cup of coffee, a cup of tea in the Perth city centre and talked about our shared love of books, and wouldn't it be great to host a book club? And in this post-pandemic era where we're all used to Zoom and the vagaries and idiosyncrasies of Zoom, as we all know, Sarika, we decided to hold a virtual book club that meets, it's about once a month. And it's a book club with a difference. It's a book club where the people turn up, the volunteers, of which you've been one, kindly enough. They bring a book that they've been inspired by or they've learned a bit from, and they share that book with the people who turn up to the book club, and we have a facilitated conversation around some of the insights and learning that the reader has got from the book, and then we have that group discussion to try and share some of those learnings. So anybody listening or watching this podcast is more than welcome, should I say, to join us. The next one is next Wednesday on the 1st of May.
Awesome. Yes, I myself have been a part of this book club, so not so regular recently enough due to life happening, and of course it can, but I know it has grown into something really beautiful. And I urge anybody listening and watching to at least go ahead and see what it's about, and experiment with it and see what you can take away out of the learnings from that book club. So without further ado, Fran, let's dive right into our amazing topic. And I think I want to start this conversation by asking you a really simple question, because I know from your LinkedIn post when I jumped upon that post and I was like, interesting, hexagonal thinking. I have never seen that term until I made a connection from somewhere, and we'll come to that at some point, I'm hoping, in the conversation. But what about hexagonal thinking intrigued you? Maybe we just start with that and take it from there.
Yeah, thank you. So what intrigued me, first of all, was the fact that I'd not heard of it. So I've been in organizations and working from now over 3 decades, so quite a long time. And a lot of the most recent 5, 6, 7 years has been around working with teams and developing some of that high performance and taking teams through oftentimes a lot of experiential activities. And we talked last time we on the podcast around the 6 thinking hats and how creative you can get. But I'd never heard of hexagonal thinking. It's so new to me that I'm still struggling to even say the words. But it was researching lateral thinking and critical thinking across the internet, and I happened to stumble across this Instagram account where I saw all these people using this fabulous technique called hexagonal thinking. And so I started exploring further, and it seems it's very popular in education. So a lot of schools across the world are using this as a tool and technique for putting together their learning classes with children. And having played and explored with it since, I've realised it's equally as effective, I think, and as powerful as something as the Six Thinking Hats, albeit that's 40 years old. I'm very new to this new one, but I'm very excited by the possible applications of it.
It is intriguing and truly, truly intriguing. So my next question probably to you would be, what's it with, going back to our title, what is it with hexagons and thinking? So, open up a little, tell us more.
Yeah, I think the magic is in the shape. So when you start looking into hexagons as a shape, a whole world opens up. And you start understanding that in nature, hexagons are a fractal in that the pattern of them naturally reoccurs all across the natural world, from the things we'll be familiar with, which is the honeycomb in bees' hives.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason bees make the honeycomb in that shape. The eyes that bees see through are actually a honeycomb shaped as well. So it's fascinating when you start looking into it. And for me, I think the connection that I make to using it with teams is, if you think about the 6 sides that they've got, then you can make lots of connections to different parts of that hexagon. So if I give you an example, Sarika, of what I would traditionally do with teams is we do a lot of activities, getting ideas out on Post-it notes. So the Sharpie and a Post-it note, we do a lot of these, and then teams will stick these up on boards, and then we'll have a cluster the topics, then an affinity mapping. So where are the ones that overlap with each other? But all you're left with is Post-it notes stuck on Post-it notes, stuck on Post-it notes, and you end up with a big jumble of Post-it notes. What I found with the hexagonal thinking is when you start putting them together, and make a connection to whatever's in this part of the hexagon. So when you start putting them on walls, and you can see an example over my shoulder here, this is one that I've drawn up, is you start creating shapes and connections to specific topics, and it becomes very powerful when you then step back and look at what it is you've created.
Nice. So just for the benefit of our listeners, what we are seeing here and what Fran was actually showing was he's cut a couple of hexagons there, so 6-sided figures there. And, when you connect one side of the hexagon to another hexagon's another side, and then, so instead of stacking one on top of the others like the Post-its, we're seeing the connections between the sides. So there's definitely some talking, some connections, something happening there, right? And that's what those linking sides are really telling us in some way, ain't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the power of this with small teams is that you start getting them to make the connections from the topics that are on the hexagons. But the next stage in the process of this hexagonal thinking is you then start you can either use a pen, or you can cut out a little arrow, and you'll get people in the teams to get the little arrows and point them to the strongest connections in the honeycomb. And then you'll say to them, talk a bit around that connection. Why is that connection so strong? Why is that connection jumping out for you? So what's happening there is, in groups, people are sharing their learnings and sharing their knowledge about some of the connections. So the whole group is, by osmosis, I guess, the whole group is learning collectively on what all these connections are. So the learning is more deeply embedded, which I think is why it's so popular with schools.
Oh, totally. So do you want to take an example in the work context, and, maybe that just brings more insight with a realistic example of what you might do with the team and how could they explore hexagonal thinking?
Yeah. So a great way of using it with a team, a great technique is, let me just go back to my little examples here. So I had the hexagon. So one example used with a team is to split the hexagon up into 6. So you've got 6 parts on the hexagon. A bit difficult to see on the video, but on this hexagon, you can put whatever you like. So on here, this is my hexagon for this new team that I'm joining. And I've written on the hexagon where I'm from, what my name is, what foods do I love, what hobbies do I have, what books do I read, and what sports do I follow. So I've got them on my hexagon here. So if you've got a team of 5 or 6 people, first stage, get them all to do their own personal hexagon. Second stage, get together around a table all around a board, a bit like we've got behind here with some blue tack, and start having a conversation with each other around what connections are they making with each other around themselves. So one topic that you may be familiar with is separate to this, but is individual user manuals. Mm-hmm. So when you create teams, you ask people to do their individual user manual. This, for me, is a different application of the same topic. So in this very creative way, where you're cutting out the hexagons, you're drawing on them, people are getting together, you then start creating the connections between the teams. What they're left with is a team map with how they're all connected. So then you've already kind of got an understanding of who's in your team, what they like, what they don't like, some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, which for me, thinking about team building and team performance, it's the foundation, the starting point for whatever comes next in that team development. So I think that'd be a great application of it.
Oh, that's really powerful, because it's in today's world, of course, managers, leaders, we need to know our teams better. In fact, as teams, we need to know each other better. And the fact that we are working in, I don't want to use any jargons, but yeah, the hybrid context where, some of us might not be in person, some of us are, I don't know, at Starbucks or at home or wherever else. So might be on the road driving the car, but unless I know my team member well enough, how am I going to communicate? How am I going to interact? How am I going to, and you did mention, the personal user manual that we all have. That's our individual operating manual, ain't it? And I think if I want to reach out Fran, and if I had made the connection, oh, he's almost working at the same working hours as I am. He loves the same kind of food. He's, a bit. So at least I know a little bit more about Fran, whether I use, something like hexagonal thinking to get those connections. I think it's really, really powerful. And I like the fact that you connected it also to a personal user manual. So it works something similar to that. But I think because of the sides of the hexagon, and I'm thinking, it actually gets your brain to think differently, doesn't it? Because you're thinking six different, again, going back to the six thinking hats that we've talked about, and for our viewers and listeners, you can find a link to that up there or up here, depending on where I show up in the YouTube video. So, but feel free to go into that podcast and, listen into more about the six thinking hats, because that's integral also, right? Plays another unique role there. But back to the hexagonal thinking, I think it brilliantly brings out these perspectives in a very different way, where we are looking at how each side could bring a connection to maybe three other people in the team. I don't know. Not just me and Fran, but it could be me, Fran, Gurel, all of us, maybe we share something common. And because of the shape of the hexagon, it allows us to connect that way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And through some of those conversations, you imagine the team have started mapping out on the table their connections. Because the conversations may go a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper because they're getting to know each other a bit more, they can, on the fly, they can start moving their hexagons around. Oh, actually, if I move that way around, I can connect with two more people in the team because they've got something similar over here. So it really gets, I totally resonate with you saying about it gets your brain thinking, because rather than just, even, I'll go back to I love Post-it notes. But for me now, thinking about the hexagon and the Post-it note, these feel very 1D, 1 or 2D. Stick them on a wall, have a conversation. What I find now with these is, it feels to me like it's all becoming 3 and 4D, where people are actually moving them around and connecting things and having conversations about the connections. And yeah, I just love the concept.
Yeah, I think in a way what we're both saying is that the shape of the hexagon is really bringing in probably the complexity of the real world into, something that we are working with our hands there. And we are thinking of that complexity and trying to somehow navigate that complexity, which I think is not necessarily possible with a square shape. At least that's my guess. I'm not a scientist. I haven't proven this, but from all the reading that I have been doing around these shapes and figures, definitely the hexagon, because of the 6 sides, it's going to allow us to think differently.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. also, I'm just thinking now about the kind of engagement this activity would bring in the team, because yes, it is going to spark a conversation, but do you think the engagement is better because of the way this is shaped, or would there be something more to it?
I personally believe the engagement will be higher.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that might be down to the novelty factor. So we do a lot of things on autopilot. Our brains create heuristics and habits because that's where we get through the world to make sense of the world. We do a lot of things without even thinking. And if I was to run a workshop with a lot of the teams I've worked with, Sarika, and pull out the post-it notes, I know their brain will go to the shortcut. Oh, this is Sharpies and post-it notes. I know what I'm doing with these. I'll just scribble a few and stick them on the wall. Now, if I turn up to a workshop and say to people, ta-da, today we're going to look at hexagons, immediately they're thinking, what is a hexagon? Why are we using hexagons? I've never seen these before, unless they go to the schools that I've been researching. But as I say, no teams I know use these. So immediately you've got the novelty factor. The brains are kicking in. Oh, whoa, this is new. What's this? So they're switched on, a little bit more alert, a bit of a threat here to our status quo. We need to be a little bit more alert. So I think from the starting point, you've already engaged people in a different way, which I think is a great jumping off point then for whatever activity follows.
Yeah, I like that. And maybe this is a good point where I can. So the only place, and you and I spoke about this when we were talking about hexagonal thinking very briefly before we jumped onto this recording. So the only place where I've used hexagonal cut figures is the Meddlers game from Management 3.0, where we are really hoping that people or leaders specifically can consider and move towards structures that enhance communication. And the reason why we have those tiles all in hexagons is essentially going back to also what we've talked about now. And honestly, I didn't connect it then to what we're talking about today is hexagonal thinking. It's essentially the same thing, where it is about the connection. It is about the communication that one tile or one side of the tile could have with, I don't know how many other tiles, right? Or
yeah.
Because if this one hexagon is connecting to at least 3 others or 4 others or 6 others, so that would be very interesting to see how all of them together are going to, I don't know, create value, whether we're talking about organizational structures or teams themselves, like you just, said, knowing each other better. So team dynamics, understanding those, or whether it is interconnectedness of even a change. So I would think we could potentially use this in so many different contexts, not limiting it at all, because I think so far I was just thinking hexagons, meddlers, management 3.0. Now I'm thinking large, I'm like, why don't I try this out in the interconnectedness of organizational change? Because I want to know how much my change is going to impact. But if I can think of all those things in terms of hexagons and start looking at those connections, and honestly, I'm just talking out loud. I'm just, thinking about this right now. I would actually think my teams could explore what is the connection, how far is the impact, and see, it's kind of doing an impact analysis and also finding out the blast radius of the change in a way and figuring out, okay, should we make this change or not? And if we do, what is going to be the impact? So, because organizational interconnectedness is complex. So it is kind of drawing out that complexity for me in my head, at least right now. You visualized it there, but yeah.
No, I totally agree. And as you're talking, I'm thinking as well. And a lot of the work that I do is systemic, so systemic coaching. So it's bringing the system in. And as you're talking through your example there, I think it's genius, because if you're thinking about change in an organization, but you start making connections around that change and what that change might impact, then over here you've got another hexagon where, it impacts somebody else, and then their team. What you're starting to map there is a map of the system. So you're doing systemic change management just through the use of hexagons. So you're bringing the system into the map. So I think it's genius.
Yeah, I mean, just going further on that, right? Imagine thinking about, okay, these are the 6 dimensions of change for this part of the organizations. And then we are thinking, okay, what's the consequence of this dimension changing or not? And what all is it impacting? And then maybe you have some 3 or 4 hexagons, further down that, because that tells me what is the cascaded effect or the consequence of that dimension changing and what it's going to impact. So I think I'm going to experiment with this. I need to. This is really good.
I mean, that'd be my first bit of advice, Sarika, is experiment. So the first experiment I did with what's this hexagonal thinking and how can I use it is I got my cards like this, and I started thinking, I read a lot of books. We talked about the book club.
Yes.
And I'm hit and miss at keeping notes in OneNote. So each book, some notes, some learning around the topic in the book. But I started thinking, the more I read the similar style books, the more there are connections that need to be made. So I was reading a book recently about managing people's energy. So emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental energy, 4 pillars of energy, and how we should manage energy and not time. And then I started thinking about how does that link to a different book that I read, which is around transitions. So how we transition, there's beginnings, neutral zones, and there's endings. But we have a transition when we go through any change. And then through those transitions, we have different energy levels. Oh, and then I started thinking, maybe those are connected. So what I did for my experiment was thinking of maybe the last 3, 4, 5 books that I've read. I started putting topics on these cards like energy, transition, coaching, change management, systemic. And then I started mapping them out on my board so that I started then having that conversation with myself.
Nice. Why
are these things connected? What's that strong connection? How does energy connect to, it turns out, everything? You think about organizations, and all organizations are a collection of people. All people have energy to manage. If people's energy levels are depleted, then the organizational levels are depleted. And the more you start mapping these things out, the more you think, the more it consolidates the learning, but it also gives me more food for thought around where some of the biggest levers you can pull when you're thinking about organizational change, because I've now got a lot more connections.
Oh, I love that. So you already experimented on that with the books. I love that piece. Maybe you should share something on that on LinkedIn soon enough. If you haven't, and I probably missed it, I don't know.
No, I've not shared that one yet on LinkedIn. I've got a screenshot of the board that's to my left here. I've got a screenshot of all the cards on there. Because that was my first experiment with it. But it's probably a good share that I could link to the book club.
Definitely. So I'm hearing a lot of applications of this already. We've talked of organizational structures. We've talked of change. We've talked of getting to know each other as, at the team level, team dynamics. So we are looking at team dynamics. We're looking at, you could pretty much use it anywhere, right? At all levels in the organization, work context, and also about yourself. I think it's pretty interesting that it's got a widespread application, not just in the education industry, but pretty much in our daily lives, in our work context, everywhere. I think it's also a great tool because it brings the visual aspect of it. So visualization is brilliant. And you and I both, we resonate on, yes, if you can make it visual, everything starts to function better.
Yeah.
What else? Engagement is definitely high with this. I see that. And I'm just seeing a number of benefits that we've been just talking about. So organization, within organization, outside organizations, the connection is huge.
Yeah, it is. And thinking about the application as well, it's very easy to apply both in person. So you imagine you're in a room and you get these things beforehand, do a bit of prep.
Yeah.
But online, it's equally as easy. So online, all I've done is in a whiteboard tool, such as Mural or Miro, whichever tool people use, I've actually created a template of coloured hexagons on a whiteboard. So if you're using it with the team, simply share the whiteboard and the hexagons in the whiteboard, and they just copy and paste as many hexagons as they want. They can write directly on the hexagons through the tool, and they can move them around. So you can do the same exercise with teams over a whiteboard.
Totally love that. Okay, so I think we are getting closer to wrapping up, but I know you already said experimentation could be, something that anyone could, try out, take this and just try it out in their context. But would there be any additional advice that you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners around hexagonal thinking?
What I would say is go down to your local stationery store and buy loads of cards. Step one. Step two, cut the cards out and get lots of them. Doesn't take long. Pen, pair of scissors, cut them out. Step three, experiment a bit like the picture behind me. Start playing with it. And like all these kind of applications, there's no right and wrong. You can't do this wrong because it's just a way of getting a conversation going. So I would experiment with yourself, do one on your own, get familiar. But then the first chance you get with a team, just introduce it. And I think you'd be surprised at the energy and buzz that it creates.
Love that. So to all our viewers and listeners, very inexpensive, except for the cards, I think. Yeah. And some time that'll get invested in cutting out the hexagons. Other than that, a very inexpensive approach to experimenting with hexagonal thinking. Hopefully that brings some value. It definitely has brought me some interesting ideas that I want to experiment. And if I do experiment that in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to come back, Fran, and we should have the conversation again.
Yes, please do. Let me know how you get on.
Awesome. So hopefully, there's been a good connection between what's the connection between hexagons and thinking. For me, it has been a very engaging way to visualize and explore this interconnectedness or connectivity amongst different aspects. I'm hoping people find their own connections in their own context. So thank you again, Fran, to bring this amazing, interesting and intriguing, should we call it a tool or?
Maybe a process.
A process, yeah. Okay. Not sure, but let people interpret it. We'll call it a tool, application, process, technique. Whatever works for you works for us. I think it's just interesting and interesting something to try out.
Definitely agree.
Any other parting thoughts from this talk, Fran, before we wrap it up?
Just leave with what we tend to always leave with is go and bring some play back into the workplace.
Super cool. So that's been a very awesome conversation. I have totally enjoyed. I have some takeaways. I'm going to go experiment right away as in next week. Okay. But for all our viewers and listeners, do experiment with this technique and tell us, what do you think? We would be keen to, hear your feedback. Until next time, thanks again, Fran. We will be back again, hopefully once again with Fran on yet another technique or process or application. And of course, we'll be back with yet another amazing guest and another topic. So until then, do like and subscribe to our channel. Take care. Bye for now.
Thank you.